promises a debt. And after the success of 4 underrated bicycle brands by popular demand, here comes this video about overrated bicycle brands, which, as you can understand for obvious reasons, is a bit trickier to make than the previous one. But I'm one of those people who believe that criticism, as long as it's constructive, elegant, and done with respect, helps any company, any person to improve. So let's go ahead with it. First of all, let me say a few caveats. To begin with, this is a list of 5 brands. In the end, not all the brands that I personally, based on my experience, consider to be overrated in the bicycle industry are included. But it's a sample of variety, let's put it that way. On the other hand, it's not a ranking either. We're not making, you'll see 5 brands, but they're not arranged in any particular order. And finally, I'd like to point out that by reading your comments on the videos in general, it's clear to me the kind of judgment you usually make. End users have a lot to do with the price of the bike itself and with the after-sales service the brand offers, especially based on some people's bad experiences with after-sales service and so on. And obviously, I take those things into consideration because I'm also a bike user. I buy my own bikes and I have to keep that in mind. But obviously, since I work in the industry, I have a lot more information about what happens inside the brands. And in the end, these kinds of lists are fed by all that information that goes far beyond what an end user might be able to access. The only thing I'm going to ask you is that in order to keep growing the project and remain as independent as possible within this sector, I need your help, I need your views, I need your likes, I need you to hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends so that in some way all of this keeps growing and I can continue dedicating time to this kind of content, 100% independent. Yes, I'm also going to ask you to leave your opinion in the comment section about what we're going to discuss. And one of the reasons that also allows me to make this kind of videos is having sponsors outside the cycling segment. Insta360 is an action camera brand that has managed to adapt very well to the needs of cyclists, unlike some of their competitors in that field, because they have released several camera models to the market that allow you to choose the type of experience you want to have, what you want to record with your cameras while riding your bike. On one hand, they have, for example, the X4, which is a 100% 360 camera capable of recording from all angles, completely hiding any mount to the bike, the helmet, or wherever you carry it, and giving the feeling that someone is actually recording you and thus giving you the possibility of having different recording angles. It's one of the cameras that I personally use the most to make review videos, onboard footage, and so on. And I think it has incredible quality for being a 360 format. On the other hand, there's the Ace Pro 2, which is personally the camera I use the most, because on one hand, it lets you do traditional vlogging, like the classic YouTuber style, let's put it that way. And on the other hand, it's probably the perfect onboard camera because of its battery life, how robust it is, and its ability to capture good audio, which is something incredible in this latest generation. And for a weight that within what we have in this type of camera is actually pretty well contained. And then there's another camera, a mini camera called Gold 3S. It weighs just a few grams, very few grams. We start the list with Ridley, the Belgian bicycle brand par excellence, a brand I know very well because I've had the pleasure of trying practically their entire road range, several gravel and mountain models. Yes, I've tried almost everything. And if there's something we have to highlight about this brand, it's that in recent years, it has become the vanguard of what was going to happen with gravel. They, understanding that they come from a strong cyclocross DNA, from there, from the Benelux, from Belgium, from the Netherlands and so on, have managed to embrace gravel very well, anticipate what was going to happen with it and understand that gravel. And it wasn't just going to be a single bike in their brand's catalogs, but there were going to be different models. One for racing, one for adventure, and one for bikepacking. They were even the first ones to release an aero gravel model. It blew all our minds when this happened many years ago. I don't know if it was 5 years ago, maybe 6 with the Noah Fast, but what time has shown us is that they were right. Nowadays, in their catalog, I don't know if they have 5 or 6 models that we can consider off-road among the bikes with drop handlebars in their lineup. And have they shown us the way, or have they shown the way to the rest of the leading brands? Because brands like Trek, which started with a checkpoint, now already have the checkmate and the checkpoint. Probably in the future, more models could come. Canyon, which started with the Grail, now has the Grizzle for adventure and the Grail 100% for competition. I mean, it's a trend that many brands are following, and we have to give that credit to Ridley. From a Spanish perspective, so you understand it well if you're not familiar with the brand. For me, Ridley is like the Belgian Orbea. There are many similarities. They can customize the colors of their bikes according to what the customer requests. It has a level of finishes, very similar material quality and bike development to what Orbea can offer. However, this is one of the Ridley brands that I am going to penalize as overrated because of its price. Because on one hand, it has extremely high entry-level prices. We're talking about entry-level prices, especially for road or gravel bikes at 7,000 euros, 6,000 euros and up. They don't equip anything below Ultegra, just so you understand. But even when comparing the same models, with Orbea, for example, they're literally between 1,500, 1,000, 1,800, 2,000 or more euros above what a brand like Orbea might cost. I completely understand that they're in Central Europe, they're in countries where the purchasing power is very high, and maybe in Belgium, in the Netherlands. 7,000 euros in expenses for a normal person, there is equivalent to 5,000 here. I don't know, but I think that for the quality of the product they have, which is very good, I insist, for the type of service they give you and so on, their prices are saying something like, we're premium, and their materials, their bikes are saying, we're really good bikes. Well, we're premium, let's not get crazy. So here's my critique. Ridley could probably have a bigger expansion in Spain if they had different prices. But I really think it's a drawback for these bikes to be seen more on our roads. The few that you see are mostly from foreigners who bring them, or from rental fleets in the Canary Islands, in Mallorca, in Girona, or wherever. Not so much from actual owners, but anyway, don't get the idea that they're bad bikes, not at all. They're very good bikes. It's just that I think for some reason, maybe because it's a Central European brand, their prices are higher than other brands you can compare them to, and those have much more competitive prices. Second brand on the list is Bianchi, and don't get upset, let's make a Bianchi parenthesis mountain section. Let's go step by step with Bianchi. A super well-known, highly prestigious Italian brand in the world of road cycling, not just in professional pelotons, but also in terms of sales and development. A brand that's able to launch products on the market that become instantly iconic the moment they appear. For example, the latest aero bike. You might like it more or less, but you can sense a high level of development in that bike. What happens that as soon as we turn our gaze and go to the mountain section, we see cobwebs. Absolutely. I mean, we have a rigid model called Nitron with geometry from literally 10 years ago, completely outdated. And we see a full suspension model like the Methanol, which, although it's minimally updated, has already been in the Yankee catalog for many years. I don't know if 6 or 7 years, honestly, it doesn't bring much to the table. All that development you see in the road bikes from the Italian brand disappears as soon as you go to the mountain bike selection. And this is where the laziness comes in, right? One of those 7 deadly sins that I penalize so much when it comes to developing bikes, laziness. Or being too clever? I don't know how to put it, because it's clear that Bianchi is a brand that goes beyond bicycles. It's a logo that you put on a t-shirt and it sells. It's a logo that you put on a mug and it sells. And it's a logo that you put on a mountain bike, on any bicycle. And even if it's not the most advanced in the world, it sells. So I think the people at Bianchi play a little with this. It's a business decision. I understand it perfectly from a business point of view. But as a user, let's say, even as a fan of cycling brands, I don't agree with it. I think this kind of strategy isn't ideal because in the end it unbalances your catalog. You have the highest level of innovation and prestige in the road section, and in the other part, you just fill it in with any bike that was designed quickly or whatever. Personally, I think other strategies being followed by brands comparable to Bianchi, like for example Colnago, are more optimal. They say, okay, so a prestigious Italian road bike brand, and they say, I develop road bikes, also a bit of gravel, incredible. Super Optimo. I don't get into mountain biking, and for me that's an option. Very interesting. Or other prestigious Italian brands, etc., etc. Like Wheelier, which also has a very well-developed road bike section, but in recent years has really stepped up its game in the mountain bike department. With the Urta Celar Urta Max, the latest model, which you may like more or less, but you can tell it has that Wheelier touch. You can tell there's some development behind it, that the bike has personality, and that the brand is really pushing it, because they have a team. Right now, they're competing in the World Cup. They're making podiums, if I'm not mistaken, in the Cape Epic and so on. So, third brand, 3T, and this is a very peculiar case because it has nothing to do with the price of their bikes or with laziness, quite the opposite. 3T is a super well-known component brand that at a certain point decides to push forward. They also manufacture their own carbon frames, an Italian brand that has its own carbon factory in Italy, where their own workers with their own hands assemble and manufacture piece by piece, sheet by sheet of carbon, each one of their frames. In other words, they have enormous added value because they're not doing it like the vast majority of mainstream international brands and so on. The manufacturing of the frames in Taiwan, in China, in Southeast Asia, wherever these brands make them. So we might think, okay, an artisanal brand, a very niche brand, a brand that has the power to do whatever it wants, absolutely to set the direction for how it wants its bikes. A brand that in recent years has been really pushing its frames related to gravel. And what I don't understand about this brand is that having the ability to create those frames from scratch and controlling absolutely the whole process. The final result is so opposite to what, in my opinion, gravel requires. If you try a 4.3T gravel, you'll realize that they're incredibly stiff. I mean, when I say incredibly stiff, they're absurdly stiff for what gravel requires. Let's see if I can explain myself. Gravel is obviously a discipline that takes the basics of road bikes, but is practiced off-road. Where there are thousands of obstacles, where the terrain is uneven, we don't have the ease that asphalt gives us with a smooth, trouble-free surface and so on. So basically, we understand that the bike needs to be able to absorb shocks. I'm not even talking about suspension yet, but the carbon itself should have the ability to absorb all the impacts that come vertically to the wheel axles. Lateral stiffness, vertical absorption. And this more or less is the competition all the brands are in. However, 3T makes frames that are incredibly stiff. Not just laterally, which would be good for maintaining all the bike's responsiveness and so on, but also vertically. And this is something I don't understand because I don't know at what point this is positive for gravel. I don't get it. They are aesthetically incredible bikes. For me, for example, the Max Italia. I think it's a beautiful bike. When you see the raw carbon finish, you just want to cry. It's like the Mona Lisa of gravel bikes. But damn, then you try it and it feels like you're driving a truck in a Formula One race. I don't know if I'm making myself clear. It's the opposite of what gravel riding requires. For example, I have the Laufsäule, which I consider to be the most shock-absorbing gravel bike I've ever tried. Regardless of the suspension. I'm talking about the frame, and all the 3T would be at the opposite end. It's hard to convey what I'm explaining to you, but the idea I want you to remember is this. They have an incredibly premium product, amazing manufacturing, and they control the whole process. And yet, the final result, in my opinion, is very far from what the discipline for which that bike was designed actually requires. The fourth brand on the list is, without a doubt, the biggest example of laziness I've seen in the cycling industry in recent times. And coincidentally, it has nothing to do with a bike brand, but rather with a motorcycle brand. I'm talking about Ducati, the Italian brand, also known for excellence in motorcycle racing, which was bought a few years ago by the Audi group, injecting a lot of money to improve performance in all the championships where they compete, like MotoGP and Superbikes. Recently, they have also entered the off-road world. And like any brand related to motorsports, they are not unaware of the benefits that selling bicycles can bring. So at a certain point, Ducati said, let's make our own bikes, but of course, let's put in as little effort as possible. So the people from Borgo Panigale went 2 factories down in the same industrial area where they are located. They knocked on the door of an Italian e-bike brand called Zoc and proposed that they make their bicycles. Ducati, which basically means changing the Zoc logo for the Ducati One and swapping out some components of the bicycles. And that's it. Do you already have the Ducati bikes? Instead of black dark like the Zoc ones, they paint them red. And that's it. That's how it is. And besides, this isn't something the brand hides. I mean, when Ducati does the presentation of the e-bikes and Ducati explains to you why they've done it this way, they tell you and they say, no. We work with ZOB because we were clear that we're experts in motorcycles, but we don't know anything about bikes. But did you want to sell bicycles and bikes in this case? So the easiest thing was to take an existing brand, change the color, change the logo, and put it on. Components that they consider to be closer to the world of motorcycling, like Öhlins suspensions, Pirelli tires, and so on, so that it's more recognizable to people coming from motorcycles, and that's it. Zero development, zero unique character for the bicycle, for the e-bike, zero hiring, zero creating a development division, not even with a couple of engineers for the e-bike area, nothing. Everything outsourced, absolutely. From a business perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Because once again, just like with Bianchi, that section of the brand, specifically the e-bike section, becomes a souvenir section. A lot of people who own a Ducati motorcycle, when they think about buying an e-bike, the first thing they're going to look at, probably without knowing much about the world of bikes and bike brands, is, hey, I'm a Ducatista, Ducati already offers me an e-bike, I'm going for this one. So, with minimal effort, Ducati achieves the maximum business result. But once again, there's no essence, no development, none of that which makes Ducati the difference in the world of competition and in the world of street bikes. And well, once again, I understand the decision from a business standpoint, but I'm completely against it. As someone who's passionate about bicycles, e-bikes, any vehicle that has pedals. 5th brand on this list, Decathlon, Rock Rider, Van Rysel. You might say, Danny, how can that be? If you put it precisely on the list of the most underrated, how can it also be on the list of the most overrated? Well, here are my arguments. I think we need to differentiate between price and value. The price is what you pay with money to take the bicycle from the store, and value is an intangible that you can't touch, but it drives the decision to buy. It creates a sense of belonging to a community, and it determines how much that bicycle will have depreciated when you go to sell it second-hand in 2, 4, or 6 years. In terms of price, compared to other brands, I think the price is obviously super competitive in Rock Rider and Van Rysel products, their own products. As I already said in the previous video, in the reviews I did last year of their road and mountain models, they have made a huge qualitative leap in terms of quality. But I think that the brands, whether it's Decathlon, Van Rysel or Rock Rider right now, are providing very little added value to the end consumer. And in the end, in these times, I think the vast majority of us don't just want to buy the product, but to live the experience. To live the experience of being part of a community, of feeling a sense of belonging to a brand, to a group, to understand myself in some way, to be part of something. And that's not just a mere transactional matter. I give you money and you give me a product. Decathlon, in that sense, is already taking steps to achieve it. We talked about it in the previous video. Professional World Tour team in the Mountain Bike World Cup. Van Rysel's own store in London, separate from Decathlon. But the reality so far is that very few people have bought a Rock Rider or Van Rysel bicycle. Because I wanted that bicycle. No matter what, either because the price was very competitive, because you had the store nearby, or because of the advantages. But up until now, I don't really feel a sense of belonging to the brand among the general public. It is true that among the workers they are a close-knit group. They have an incredible level of attachment to Decathlon, starting with my brother who worked there. I mean, thousands of cases that each of us knows, because there's always someone in our circle who has worked at Decathlon. And in general, the workers at Decathlon, and especially those in the cycling section, get together to go out cycling, form groups, go to races together, and meet up with people from different decathlons all over Spain. They have a strong sense of belonging, but so far the brand hasn't been able to convey that to the general public. In my humble opinion, however, what we have is a brand image and brand value that is practically non-existent. And I'll give you an example. A few years ago, when I lived in Costa Blanca, I had several acquaintances who maybe had mountain bike models. Entry-level full suspension bikes from traditional bicycle brands, let's say an entry-level KTM full suspension, a Scarpa with aluminum wheels, no dropper post, that came standard with an aluminum handlebar, basic drivetrain, and all of a sudden, Decathlon showed up with these deals that became popular a few years ago, where they released 500 units of their full suspension bike. Right? The 940 is the current one. The previous one had the rear triangle made of aluminum, which was a very limited bike, which was an offer of just a few units at a laughably low price, with top components, Mavic carbon rims, top of the line Hutchinson tires, carbon handlebars, dropper seat posts, etc. I know several cases of acquaintances who bought those bikes at a laughably low price. They would take off all the top components, put them on their own bikes where they had high-end components, and those high-end components were installed on the Rock Rider frame and then sold second-hand at whatever price they could get, because their plan had already worked out well for them. They weren't buying the bike, they didn't care about the bike, they wanted the components, they couldn't care less. The Rock Rider frame, in fact, they didn't even keep it, they sold it off cheaply, but it didn't matter to them. The idea was to buy carbon wheels, a dropper seat post, a nearly top-of-the-line drivetrain, and so on, all at a really good price. I can't imagine this happening with other cycling brands that have a much higher added value. Why do you want to have that bike so much? Is it that I want to have that Canon because I love that bike model or that particular brand, or am I just eager to have that kind? Something aspirational without getting into whether it's premium or not. Just something it creates a desire in you to be part of it and have it at home, to ride that bike, and so on and so on. So I think that even though Carlon has a very competitive price and a very competitive product, they're really lacking in this area, really lacking. And therefore, for me, as of today, even though they're working on it and I know they'll get there, it's overrated in that aspect. Anyway, do you agree with me? Yes or no? Leave it in the comments. I think it'll be interesting to read what you write down there. Be very happy. See you in the next videos. Bye bye.